start the class. Look, here we have our class, the Sephardi Identity. And this is the second time I'm teaching this because I came up with this class. Most people, especially Jewish people, will know that there are Sephardi, Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews, right? Two different groups. And how is this come? Because we saw throughout the Middle Ages that a big dichotomy, the different groups, and we saw it many times, and we brought it up many times, is Jews from Islamic culture and Jews from Christian culture. That was the biggest, contradiction in culture, in thinking, in philosophy, and but now we have Sephardi and Ashkenazi. It's not exactly the same. People sometimes think it's the same. Now, a lot of the things that we saw from Islamic culture was from Spain. So a lot of the important things that happened in the Islamic world concerning Jews happened in Spain. Spain was very important, right? Also, some later we saw Sadi Gaon was of course in Baghdad, and we saw the Caraghanese in Egypt, and Maimonides in Egypt. But Spain was really very important. Now Spain isn't Islamic anymore, of course, for quite a while, but for at least for part of it, it was, as we all know now, right? At the end of this course, for sure. If there's one thing you know, that is it. So you'd think that these Sephardi people came from Spain. How did they change their, let's say, Arabic identity with a Spanish identity? That's what I want to look at. How did that happen? In other words, this is what I wrote. How did Sephardi Jews end up with a Spanish or a Portuguese, or Spanish Portuguese, it's also called, rather than an Arabic identity? All right, we're going to look at that. Now, I don't know if we're going to go through all the slides, because I have 100 slides exactly. And if we don't get to do them all in depth, then we'll just go fast, or we skip a bunch. But the general idea I want to go into now. I will start with just reading a few slides myself, and then I will give turns for people to read again. So, the stereotypical idea that often is presented about the history of Jews in Spain is as follows. Spain was under Muslim rule for 700 years, and during that period there was tolerance and peaceful coexistence and prosperity and justice for all. Right, okay, so that is a very idealized idea, of course, but okay. And then goes the story, then the Christians came, they reconquered Spain, and the Jews were persecuted and exiled. That is quite a black and white stereotypical idea. So it's unbalanced stereotype I wrote here. And with all stereotypes, there still is a grain of truth in it. So what is actually truth and what not? Jewish flourishing did indeed occur under Muslim rule, as nowhere else, but for a rather limited period. Specifically, we saw Abdurrahman III, Al-Hakam II, we saw, and then we saw later under the Taifas, right? And a bit under the Almoravids later, but that was it. For a rather limited part. When did it happen? When the rulers were not exactly abiding by Islamic law and the rules of the dhimma. We know what that is. When we also saw outbursts of and periods of oppression during that time. So it wasn't all hunky-dory, it wasn't all romantic and wonderful either. So even that period that had a lot of goodness in it, the period under Islam in Spain, also had its dark sides, except for the exceptional level of flourishing during these good times. Oh no, because of that flourishing, right? This positive impression sticks out favorably in the collective consciousness of history, meaning people remember that. It stands out, specifically if you contrast that with later periods in Christian time. So if you compare the good times in under Islam with the bad times of under Christianity, under Christendom, then there's this very stark um, then a stark how do you say contrast. Okay, you know what? I'm going to just go to court because I don't even know. Can you? I think it's harder to follow if somebody talks all the time. By any chances, I don't think Gabriella is here. Sylvia is here. Sylvia?
Hi.
Hey, Sylvia, how's it going?
Good.
I'm so happy to see you. Would you like to take over for me for a bit?
Sure. The golden age for the Jews in Al-Andalus of cultural flourishing did not end suddenly. Even during its height, periods of thriving were interspersed with times of hardship. We learned about the massacre in Granada, in which Yosef Hanagid was killed. On
Yeah, so
December 30th,
yeah, you don't have to read that because that's actually an image of a slide that we had before. So just refreshing your memory about this slide. Yeah. Okay.
there were also periods of flourishing and tolerance under Christian rulers, especially during the earlier periods following Reconquest. However, the later levels of oppression were also so systematic and total that this is what stands out in history.
Yeah. So people often forget good times under Christianity because it ended up and the periods of oppression came so bad and lasted so long that everybody remembers that. So, but we here, scholarly students here, we want to see the nuances. Don't want to just stick to black and white. For instance, here,
We encounter the Almohads, in which forced most Jews out of Muslim Spain and forced Maimonides and many others to hide their Jewish identity. Such persecutions by the hands of Muslim rulers or by mobs drove Jews to Christian lands.
yeah, we saw that, right? And this is also a slide from before that I'm just showing. Um, let's continue.
At the same time, the Reconquista, the gradual reconquering of Spain by the Christians, brought increasing number of Jews under Christian rule, including those who had never left their towns during times of oppression.
Yeah, so let's say you live in Toledo, you and Toledo is Islamic, and you're an Arab Jew, so to say, culturally and linguistically. And now the Christians take it. So now you live under Christian rule. So some people went under Christian rule because they moved, they fled from the Almohads, but others just because their city was conquered. So they never left their towns. Um, they were just conquered. But more and more, so there are two movements, right? There are more places where Jews live that come under Christian rule, and in addition, there's people who flee actively from one area to the other.
We also saw Jews had become involved in the study of philosophy when this was in vogue under most Muslims.
In Vogue, do you know that word?
Yeah.
In fashion, okay. But Vogue, I know you probably know that there's a magazine called Vogue, but that means fashion in a way. Yeah.
During periods when Muslim rulers suppressed the study of philosophy among Muslims, they often did not care if Jews were involved in it. As a result, Jews were the ones who continued the study of philosophy and even rendered it back to Muslims once it was permitted again.
Yeah, we
Again,
can't take too much credit about spreading philosophy in the world. Really, the Greeks were the ones who initiated, and yeah, Jews have been, but and Muslims had passed it on. That's called Arabic philosophy. It's based on Greek, but with a religious monotheistic twist to it. Jews, of course, did that too. Maimonides, Adjunct, we saw. But it's not that we invented it, we implied it. We applied it in our own religion. But we were very instrumental in often, in certain periods, in passing it on by translating it. And so we gave it back to Muslims later. And also, you can see this later, we helped passing it on to the Christian world. Yeah.
Under Islamic rule, most Christians had converted to Islam. The remaining Christians were mostly villagers and farmers, only minimally educated. As a result, very few Christians were involved in the study of philosophy in Al-Andalus.
Yeah, in Andalus, of course, is the Islamic territory. So not so many, there were some, but not many. So it was not really a big Christian movement. And also in the north, where the Christians were ruling for a while, that wasn't really as developed. It was really something that was happening in the Islamic world for a while. Yeah.
Once living under Christian rules, Jews initially held onto their Arabic identity. They spoke Arabic among themselves, and they were still culturally Arabic. However, over time, this changed, even though some families continued aspects of this heritage for centuries, especially the knowledge of Arabic language, notably the Kimhi and the Ibn Tiban families.
Yeah, for quite a while, actually, a Jew would be recognized in Christian Spain as somebody who was wearing a turban. That was no black hats, turbans. That was the Jewish look. I think I like turbans better than black hats. Maybe we can make a compromise. Black turbans. How's that? Okay.
At
Yeah.
first, when
Oh,
Christians
are you black hat? No, I'm black turban. Okay.
At first, when Christians captured territories from the Muslim, the new Christian rulers did not have intimate knowledge of the society they had conquered. Who were the important families? What were the relations between certain neighborhoods? All financial and demographical records were in Arabic, a language they could not read.
Yeah. So that was a problem with the rulers, right? You conquer a territory that you don't really know. How can you rule it? So yeah.
Naturally, most Christian rulers in Spain avoided employing subjugated Muslims as they could perhaps try to take revenge or spy for the Muslim rulers in the south, etc. Therefore, Jews were especially useful for the Christian conquerors. As mentioned before, the indigenous Christians were generally much less educated and as a result less useful as administrators.
Yeah, so they would bring people from the north who were educated, Christians, but also they were very much. By the way, there were Christians who employed Muslims, but we think of Christian. I mean, not everybody thinks of it, but some people think of Al-Andalus as being having Muslims and Jews and Christians living together, yeah, which is true. But then we think of Christian society as just being Christians with a few oppressed Jews, but no Muslims. But in this period of time in north of Spain, you also had large Muslim minorities. They didn't just disappear overnight, and Jewish minorities, and was actually also very multicultural for a while. As you get the picture. You know what, Sylvie, you're reading so well and so nice, and I enjoy it. But I'm gonna go to someone else now.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Marlene.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Marlene. Hello. Good. We're going to the next slide, Marlene, with you.
Okay. A situation occurred which mirrored what we saw in Muslim Spain in the years of the golden age of Al-Andalus, kings appointing Jewish administrators and advisors close to the throne. A second golden age occurred for the Jews of Spain, this time under Christendom. Jews had transplanted their Andalusian heritage and now continued this tradition under a new lucky star.
So in the beginning, also the way that the Jews functioned was very much as they had done under Islam, but now under Christians. When you see again these pointy hats, typically medieval way of depicting Jews, because Jews were forced in many countries to wear these pointy hats. Yeah.
In addition, with the advent of the Almohads, Jewish life in Islamic Spain had become impossible. There was nothing there to long back to. It is not surprising that under these circumstances, Jews soon started to identify with the culture and language of Christian Spain, as they had done before with the culture and language of Al-Andalus.
Yeah, so gradually that happened. They started to speak Spanish. Ever it was not really called Spanish, but Romance, the local language, yes.
For a period, Jews felt they were appreciated partners of the winning party. And indeed, the ruling class much appreciated the Jewish input. Jews brought financial services, the option to borrow and invest, and the knowledge of sciences such as medicine and astronomy. Because of their linguistic knowledge, Jews were also instrumental in mediation with the Muslim opponents and in translating documents.
It seems like a recipe for success, and indeed it was in the beginning. Unfortunately, we're going to see things are going to change, and we'll just continue.
At this point, Christian society also developed a curiosity and an appetite for philosophy, which could be satisfied by the Jews as well, satiated by the Jews as well. By translating works of philosophy and science into Latin, Jews contributed greatly to the study of these fields, which eventually paved the way for the Renaissance and the Enlightenment in Europe.
Yeah, it's surprising to think that Jews translated into Latin, but they did. And indeed, if you remember, our last class on the Cairo Geniza, we saw an example of Aristotle in Latin, but with Hebrew letters. So cool, so cool. Okay, but so they also, yeah. Now here.
Nonetheless, the influence of philosophy gradually waned in many Jewish communities, even though it never disappeared. Interest in Kabbalah would gradually become more prevalent than philosophy.
You saw here, you don't have to read that, that's the slide from before. Right, okay, and?
Kabbalah especially flourished in Aragon and Catalonia.
You saw Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, who denied the existence of the law of nature and actually said it was a heresy, that God decides everything and there is no law of nature that God is bound by or even uses. So it's not very philosophical, it's Kabbalistic in a way. Not necessarily Kabbalistic, but yeah, Nachmanides was into Kabbalah for sure. Now, what else is happening? This is old stuff. What else is happening? This is now interesting, I think.
Let's look at a few examples of Jewish writings that fit very well within the culture of Northern Christian Spain and not anymore in an Arabic Islamic setting. Isaac ibn Sahula, Mishal Akadam.
Yeah, Mishal Hakadmoni, which means old mashal, or is a proverb, or let's say wisdom. It means the wisdom of old. And you see, this doesn't look Islamic. This is very much a reflection. These pictures here, but these pictures are original, actually. Very, or at least very old. This is a book, Mashallah Kadmoni. It's very much, it's in Hebrew, but it's very much, let's say, modeled after similar books that occur in the Christian world. Yeah.
Isaac ibn Sahula was a Jewish scholar, probably a rabbi, a physician, a Kabbalist, and a poet. Isaac lived during the reign of Alfonso X, named the Wise. Alfonso promoted the sciences, and during his reign, not only Christians, but Jews and Muslims as well had prominent positions in his court.
Yeah. So you see, he did employ Muslims too. And not only that, that's why he's called the Wise, maybe. He was smart. He said, what's good for my country? And we want to use the knowledge of everybody's knowledge, no matter who it is, if he's Jew or Christian or Muslim. Of course, he was a Christian himself. I wouldn't deny that. But this is kind of a bit like the good days of Al-Andalus under Al-Hakam II, where these things happened too, or in some of the taifas. Here, it happened under Christians. And maybe his reign is one of the best examples of this. Yeah.
In 1281, Ibn Sahula was in Egypt when he decided to dedicate his life to writing stories with a moral purpose. His major work, Mishal HaKadmoni, between 1281 and 1284, was a book of fables expressly written to displace with an original Hebrew work such light literature as Kalila and Dimna and the voyages of Sinbad and Sailor, which were read extensively by Jews in the Middle Ages in Hebrew translations.
Yeah, you see on the left is Kalila with Dimna. We actually, last class, we found an example of that in the Cairo Geniza. I showed that to you. And right is one of the amazing stories of Sinbad the Sailor. Yeah, so people love these stories, Yeah.
Therefore, Ibn Sahula introduced in his book a similar structure and mode of presentation, and even added illustrations to his book, as was prevalent in non-Jewish literature. The manuscripts and all the printed editions of the work are embellished with interesting miniatures or woodcuts.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? It's so nice to look at, and every page has tons of. I only got a few. There's hundreds and hundreds of these illustrations. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you. I'll give you one more slide and then pass somebody else.
Divided into 5 chapters, Mishal HaKadmoni contain parables, stories, and tales, all written for educational purpose. Each section starts with the words of a cynic who opposes a virtue, wisdom, penitence, sound.
Penitence, which means teshuvah. How do you call that? Penitence is
Yeah.
repentance, meaning yeah, feeling bad about the things that you do wrong and making amends.
So, penitence, sound counsel, humility, which are then refuted by the moralist. The 5th section on reverence is a diatribe against astrology and determinism.
Determinism, can you explain what that is?
Nah, I'm not sure.
Everything is determined. So meaning why everything is written in the stars, or maybe it's written in the book of God. What's going to happen to my life? How can I change my fate? Just what's going to happen is going to happen anyway. Why there is no free will. That's basically determinism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Marlene. Lovely.
Um,
Christina is here, I believe.
Yeah.
Hey, Christina.
Hey.
Hello. We'll go to the next slide with you if you have no objections. You don't have to do the Hebrew, but just for people who know, they can see it. It's rhyming, so everything is a rhyme basically, and it would be interesting. But we'll just stick to the English today.
Who, said the cynic, though with piety endowed, can of knowledge yet be proud? Why in your wisdom do you so rejoice, that like a trumpet you must raise your voice? Be not here in my presence overawed, fearing
Overawed, yeah.
Oh, overawed.
Meaning you're in awe, but you're overly in awe, overawed.
Fearing so the word of God, your Lord. In God you fear, but fear no profit brings, just as from disregard for God no damage springs. All things wear out, all things must end, as was decreed, and man cannot forfend, nor tear his sentence up, cause prayer has no power, nor fear of God to save in evil's hour. For all things from necessity proceed, none can escape the lot for him decreed. How should the stars set in their course, elect to swerve? Man fares just as the stars direct.
Yeah, I tried to make this in rhyme. I think it's pretty okay. Only the last two lines don't really rhyme, but otherwise, I think it's good. So yeah, it says they believe that the stars determine your fate. So I already mentioned a few times that people thought that astrology is really a science. Now, but he says, then if that is true, then there's no free will, because if you pray or you change you want to change your course of your life, the stars don't change. So you're going to pray the stars into a different place? No. So the stars are where they are, and therefore what's happening is happening. That's actually a very strong point if you believe in the determining power of the stars. Right? Now, was there anything else I wanted to point out? No. So this is what the cynic says. Now it's answered by the moralist. Who's this now?
How, said the moralist, came this affair, that your brain is frying in such an air of splendid triumph? Once upon a time, said he, a stork did build her nest high in a tree of pine or fir near Egypt's eastern shore. Wise was she, endowed with secret lore. Attending scholars' words, she had addressed their constant teachings on a mountain crest. Joy at her rank spread blooms of happiness, rose like midst all the birds. And royalty no less rejoiced in saints, that in her utterance such quality was found. Her sustenance came from a swamp. Close by her nest she found frogs, in their multitudes did there abound. Each day her appetite she there would slake, and for her household too, enough she'd take. Now it so happened in that self same bog, quietly and calmly lived a humble frog.
Yeah. So there's this. It's just a story, right? It starts with that. Once upon a time, there was this proud and happy stork who was whatever, and she lived next to a bog, to a swamp, and it's full of, and she eats. She finds all her food there. Now it happened that there was a humble frog living there, and it continues. A humble frog, yeah.
The stork, she planned to trap this frog, and she came near her house door to attack her in the rear, to catch the frog by means of cunning words, uttered from the mouth of the most learned of the birds. Why would you hide on trouble's day and creep beneath a tree trunk's weight in mud so dark and deep? Does time not teach to all created things that on each living animal it flings its net, bringing the moment of its death with speed, fulfilling thus its fate, precisely as it was decreed? And no device or hiding in the mud, or wisely balanced thoughts will help to save your blood.
Yeah, he says, come out, you little froggy, because whenever you die, you're going to die. That's determined by the stars. You cannot escape. That's totally useless. And of course, the frog. By the way, it's really interesting. It says the most learned of the birds. The Hebrew word for a stork is hasidah, which actually is a feminine word. That's why it talks about she. But that actually means a chassid, like a pietist. So this is the most learned of the birds. Is a chassid. The bird is a chassid, basically. You know, chassid. Yeah, very interesting.
Her voice brought shudders to the frog, who chose her words with care and an answer to compose. Has not, she said, the God of Israel made known his commandments for all men ordained? With all thy might from evil keep aloof, ordinating too, that each protect his roof, building a fence, that God may call him free of sin, should any person slip and fall. Likewise, he ordered those with fearful heart, dismissed from battle, homeward to depart. God's law has clear instructions that were taught to warn his creatures of the things they ought alertly shun. And now, if fate's decree were truth, ordained alertness would but be a false delusion. Such commandments would prove vain in their fulfillment, if it were that fate would reign. No man was granted free will that he should seek bliss and safety, pursuing what is good.
The rhyme still works pretty okay. It says, yeah, but listen, the Torah gives all kind of laws that actually teach people to be careful and to avoid calamity. Let's say you have to, if you have a roof that you can walk on the roof, people sit on the roof, flat roofs, right? You have to build a fence around your roof. Why is that? To fall off. If every thing was ordained, then why would that roof, that commandment be given? Somebody is ordained to fall off the roof, you fall off the roof no matter if there is a fence or not. And if the fence is going to be meant to be built, it would be built anyway, even if the Torah doesn't tell us. So this is just an example of a Mashallah Kadmoni, and it goes on, and it's very thick work, but I thought I'll give you this little example. So this is the answer of the frog, and of course the frog wins out the argument, but the argument is much longer than this. We'll go to somebody else. We'll go to Santop de Carrion, who lived mostly in the 14th century, and he wrote, not in Hebrew, he wrote in Spanish, Proverbios Morales, which is almost similar to Mashallah Kadmoni, because Mashal means proverb, and so these are, but this is not, Mashallah Kadmoni, this book is in the shape of fables. This one is just sayings. It's not a fable, but so Santop de Carrion, so those who know Hebrew, Santop is actually a bastardized form of Shem Tov, but it was made into Spanishized, so to say, into Santop. And I have some of the, now look, I have some of the English, and I have the whole bundle in Spanish. Well, it's Old Spanish. It's for those who know Spanish, it's quite a bit different, but I think you would probably understand most, even though the spelling is different and stuff. But it's very hard to find which English belongs to which Hebrew, to which Spanish, because the orders are messed up. And unfortunately, I'm not that good at Spanish. But here is Proverbios Morales, moral proverbs. Santo de Carrion dedicated it to King Pedro of Castile, who was known as the Cruel. So he wanted the guest to give him some moral proverbs to make him less cruel. Is my king. So, Señor Rey Noble Alto, hoy este sermón que viene decir Santo Judío de Carillon. Judío, now it would be Judío in Spanish, but in those days, I have heard that that the J was pronounced in as J, and also the V was not always pronounced as a V, but still as a V. And like every language evolves, so not everything is pronounced the same as it's pronounced now. But Lord, King, noble and high, hear this discourse, which actually sermon, it says sermon, right? Hear this sermon, but not literally, which Santo comes, it's actually Santo in Spanish, comes forward to speak, the Jew from Carrion. Okay, Christina, want to read the other two strophes?
When King Alfonso died, the people were left sick like a man when his pulse fails. For a moment they did not reflect that a cure remained, nor could anyone imagine that it was possible.
Meaning Alfonso was so good, he was Alfonso the Wise, remember? And so they were so in distraught, but that's probably the father of Pedro. Yes, this continues here. This is a continuation.
When a dry rose leaves the world in its time, its rosewater remains of greater worth. In the same way, you have survived him in order to live a long life and do the things he wished to acquit. For example, the sum he promised me, which is of slight worth to you, but with which I could live without any shame.
Yeah, so Santo de Carrion says, oh, your father was so wonderful, and we were so distraught when he died, but you can even be better than him and fulfill all his wishes. By the way, he had wished, he told me, to give me a sum of money. And of course, you want to fulfill your father's promises. It's for you, it's nothing, but for me, it would be so important. And so in his poem, he's really asking for money. Oh, that is so funny. Yes?
For being born on a thorn bush, a rose is certainly not worth less, nor is good wine if taken from the lesser branches of the vine, nor is a hawk worth less if born in a poor nest, nor are good proverbs if spoken by a Jew.
So he's almost saying, I know I am only a Jew and I'm lower than a real Spaniard. It's interesting because that in Christian Spain, that was a theme, and it became a theme gradually more and more and more, that if you are born of Spanish blood, you are nobler than a Christian Spanish blood, you're nobler, an old Christian is called, you're nobler than other people. And so a Jew was looked upon, down upon. He's interesting, actually saying the same thing. So a rose is worth a lot, but it's born from a thorn bush. Nobody likes a thorn bush. So, but it brings forth a rose. Wine, you could say this is an ugly bunch of grapes, but the wine could be really excellent. A hawk, a nest of a hawk is not really built so greatly, so beautifully. It's loose. It's not. Some birds build much better nests, but the hawk is worth a lot. And so my Proverbs, it comes only from a Jew. A Jew is not so highly valued, but my Proverbs could be just as well okay. And what are these Proverbs? I'm going to give you, I stopped providing the Spanish here, but that's okay, I guess. Yeah?
I find in this world two kinds of men, and no more. I can never find a third. A seeker who seeks and never finds, and another who is never content with what he finds. One who finds and is satisfied, I cannot find. Such a person I would call truly fortunate and wealthy. For there is no poor man except a greedy one. The only wealthy man is he who is content with what he has.
Yeah, you can be wealthy and have a nice suit and a silk tie, but you might be unhappy. These people, I know them personally, by the way. They live in Uganda. These are Jewish people from whatever. Their ancestors converted to Judaism 100 years ago, and they're celebrating Sukkot here. And they have a very different life. But look, they smile. They're happy. They dance. They sing. So That's okay. Yes, another one maybe. And then we'll go to Amy after that.
He who wishes only what he needs will be satisfied with little, but he who wants more than he needs, the entire world will not be enough. When he uses what he needs, he uses his own substance, but whatever exceeds these needs enslaves him his whole life long. The whole day long he is exhausted, restless to get it, and through the night he is anxious out of fear of losing it. He gets less pleasure from seeing what he has than pain from the fear of losing it.
That's a wisdom that has been valid for over the centuries, right? If you have a lot and you're never satisfied, you're also never happy. But some people live a modest life; they have what they have, and that's an art to be just happy with your lot, as they say. Just be happy with what you have, and you have enough, and just enjoy life as it is. This poor shoe shine boy who is uh, uh, having a good laugh, and he looks cheerful, much more cheerful than this rich person. Doesn't mean I wish you all to be poor, by the way. I wish you to be. It says if there are people, there's three different people. Some people have and they're satisfied, and that is the very hard to have. But that is the ideal thing. By the way, before I go to Amy, let's finish this because this is the last slide of the Proverbios Morales.
People have decided to hold no in disdain, but there is nothing that makes me happier than no. From the day I asked my lady if she did not have another lover besides me, she said no.
Yeah, that's a good no. Some no's are good, right? Do you hate me? No. Okay, good. I don't want to hear it. Thank you so much, Christina. Amy, are you available?
Yes.
Excellent. Good to hear you again after a while. Let's take it from here.
Okay. The downside of this new period of flourishing was that it caused envy among the general Christian population. The church, which taught that Jews should only be tolerated in a humiliated position, fed into this deeply ingrained sense of resentment. It was felt that the Jews should know their place. Besides, the Jews were seen as Christ killers. Gradually, the pressure on the Jews to convert to Christianity increased.
Yeah, so if you preach a lot from the New Testament, and every year you have Easter, and so Easter is the crucifixion of Jesus, what typically happens is that Jews were blamed for the suffering of Jesus, which is kind of interesting because for Christians, actually a blessing because he died for the sins of the world. So you should be happy that because if he wasn't crucified and suffering, you would all be in sin, supposedly, right? So you would say, but no, it was actually seen as proof that Jews are so evil, and that was then transplanted on the Jews who lived among them. So it became very, very, very often anti-Jewish ranting, unfortunately, the holiday of Easter, and scary times. Uh-huh.
Starting in the late 1370s, a preacher by the name of Ferrand Martinez lit up the anti-Jewish fire among the masses to a disastrous degree. He went around preaching, describing the wickedness of the Jews, and called for anti-Jewish violence. The storm of violence broke out in Seville in June of 1391. The Jewish neighborhood was destroyed, many Jews were killed, and even more agreed to be baptized and thereby saved their lives.
It was a big disaster, of course.
After the storm had calmed down, most of the Jews who had converted to save their lives expected to return to their previous identity. After all, the church did not endorse forced conversions, so logically their baptism should be invalid. However, the leaders of the church ruled differently.
They came with a different idea. I mean, yeah.
According to them, the violent outbursts should not have happened, but nonetheless the conversions had, technically, not been enforced. After all, there had been a choice. The converts had consciously and freely chosen conversion over death, and therefore, after the fact, these conversions were valid. As a result, these new Christians were not allowed to return to Judaism.
It was always under force because why? If you're threatened with life, and that's what's called force, then and you save your life, it's not because it's force, but you don't mean it. So you have to mean it. But they said now they became more restrictive. They said, no, you could have chosen death. That's your free choice. And so you chose to become a Christian instead of die. And so it's a free choice. That's not, we don't call that force. Of course, that's a very, very self-serving way. But so they're not allowed to return to Judaism. even though, whatever. Yeah. Now this has huge impacts for now.
The result of this was that there was now an entire community of formerly Jewish new Christians. These new Christians now officially had a Christian identity without hardly knowing anything about Christianity. Leaders of the church saw it as their task to educate these new Christians and transform them into proper Catholics.
Yeah, be it nicely or be it under force. So now all of a sudden these people are targets. And new Christians is the term. And people start looking down on new Christians because you have old Christians. That's an old Christian. People are proud to be called an old Christian versus a new Christian. Yeah.
New Christians received the same rights as other Christians, which opened new venues for their livelihood, but also made many old Christians quite unhappy as it posed sudden competition in many lines of business. Also, the new Christians were suspected of insecurity in their Christian convictions and practice, often rightfully so.
Yeah. So first they're forced to become, against their will, to become Christians, and then they are blamed for not being sincere. Yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it too, I would think.
The Jewish community still perceived new Christians as Jews, and some community members saw it as their responsibility to strengthen the converts' Jewish identity and help them stay connected. Especially during the first generations, there was still family ties between the communities of the new Christians and the Jews, as well as trading relations. People would visit each other, sleep over, and new Christians sometimes ended up spending Shabbat or holidays with Jewish relatives and friends. Sometimes Jews were caught delivering kosher meat to new Christians or matzot for Passover.
Yeah, so the Christians saw it as their task to make these new Christians into good Christians. And some of the Jews saw it as their task to keep them connected to Judaism. They were just Jews on Christians. They were Jews under hiding. And but this came out that some people were caught celebrating Shabbat, even though they're now considered Christians. What happens here?
The church, aided by the rulers, physically separated the new Christians from the Jewish community and started to oversee and prevent interactions and Judaizing. Judaizing means harboring Jewish beliefs by Christians or practicing Jewish customs.
Yeah, so the church wants to have control, make sure that there's no Judaizing anymore, no influencing from old Jews from the Jews on the new Christians.
An important tool for tracing and punishing Judaizers was the Inquisition, a powerful independent organization that would trace Judaizers, imprison, torture, and interrogate them. The first head of the Spanish Inquisition was the notorious Thomas de Torquemada.
Thomas de Torquemada. Some people still, shivers go down the spine if you hear his name. What a piece of you-know-what. I mean, it's a... you see here images, and those are images, from the Inquisition. That's what people would interrogation. So what does this do?
If the Inquisition found someone accused of Judaizing to be guilty, such a person could repent and get a second chance, but repeaters and unrepented people were burnt at the stake.
Yeah, so burnt alive. And look, you can be found guilty, but you can be found guilty after torture. So we already saw that from the blood libel that you can torture somebody, even if you say, yes, I did secretly celebrate Shabbat, you're going to say that, you're going to be burned at the stake. But the pain, the actual pain at the moment is so bad that you wanted to stop that. Even knowing that, people would still, you can torture somebody to how do you say, to admit to something like that.
Such a public burning of heretics was called an auto de fe, act of faith.
Auto de fe, yeah, act of faith. Believable, huh? Now, this was on huge scale.
In general, under torture, people were forced to report other Judaizers, and in this manner, more and more Judaizers were found. The question is, of course, if those Judaizers who were reported by tortured people were really guilty of what they were accused of, or if the people who reported them were actual Judaizers themselves. In any case, it was lucrative for the Inquisition to find Judaizers, truly guilty or not, as this legitimized their power. In addition, all the convicted Judaizers' properties were confiscated by the Inquisition.
So there's a money-making business. You torture somebody until he admits that he's a Judaizer. You find other people. You get all their stuff. right? So there's a book by Professor Herman Solomon. I mentioned him before, and when we talked about Yehuda Levi, maybe once or twice and other times, who wrote a big book. He's actually probably the expert on specifically the Portuguese Inquisition, more than the Spanish. But he calls it the Marrano factory. A Marrano is a secret a Judaizer, basically, somebody who secretly, he's outwardly Christian but secretly practicing Judaism. And he said because the Inquisition did this, they were a factory. They actually created Marranos. They created Judaizers. Um, he believes that there were very few people, if any, who eventually people converted. They gave into the lot. Okay, we converted now. Okay, so that soon enough people started identifying with Christianity, but that they were almost forced into the identity of Judaizing because of the Inquisition. Well, that's a theory, of course. Okay, I'm not saying it's true, but this is a theory. Now comes more pressure. The Disputation of Tortosa. Thank you so much, Amy. Lovely, good reading. Is Micaiah here?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. I can always count on Micaiah. Micaiah, do you want to read what the Disputation of Tortosa is? Tortosa is
Yeah.
a town, by the way. Okay. Yeah.
In many ways, the Tortosa disputation was quite different from an earlier disputation of Barcelona in 1263.
Yeah, very good. Now, the Disputation of Barcelona is one of the voluntary, like the extra credit options, which I gave you a link. I'll send it out again. It's just a video which puts enacts the Disputation of Barcelona, but you haven't maybe seen it yet, so I can't compare it. But we'll just continue and then we'll get an idea.
Okay. During the disputation of Barcelona, Maimonides had been granted immunity.
This is Moses ben Nachman, had the one who didn't believe in laws of nature. That guy was the one to, in this forced disputation, is a forced discussion, like a competition in arguments. Nachmanides had been the one in Barcelona to represent the Jewish community in argument. He had been granted immunity, so he said, if you want to argue, the king had said, if you want to, King James of Aragon, he had said, if you want to have an honest disputation, then you have to be able to use any argument. So Nachmanides could use any arguments he wants, even if it was, let's say, insulting to the Christians. But here, that wasn't the case.
In Tortosa, while the Christian side could use any arguments and accusations against Judaism, the Jewish side was very much restricted in what they could say. Any response to Christian charges were met with accusations of heresy and blasphemy. In other words, the Tortosa disputation was not a free discussion between two parties. It was merely an act of propaganda and a strategic attack against Jews, involving great psychological pressure, including intimidation and threats. The Tortosa disputation was led by Pope Benedict VIII.
Yeah, the 13th.
The 13th, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So even the Pope himself was presiding over the disputation. And he said, honestly, this is to bring you to Christianity. This is not a free, open debate. So, the terms are really not honest. It's not yeah.
One of the representatives of Christianity was a Dominican preacher called Vincent Ferrer, tellingly nicknamed Angel of the Last Judgment. During his life, having great power at his disposal, Ferrer could focus on converting Jews, thereby using physical and psychological pressure and harsh methods, which resulted in approximately 25,000 Jewish converts. Ferrer also contributed greatly to the spread of anti-Semitism that would become a deeply ingrained part of Spanish culture. Another representative of Christianity during the disputation was a Jewish convert by the name of Geronimo de Sancta Fide, formerly known as Yehoshua ben Yosef ibn Vives.
Excellently pronounced, everything. Really good. Yeah, now the Jewish side.
Some of the people representing Judaism were Profia Durin, Isaac ben Moses Halevi. What is most interesting is that during the massacres of 1391, Durin had forcibly been converted to Christianity. At that occasion, he had received the Christian name Honoratus de Bonafide. In 1394, Isaac had tried to emigrate to Israel, so he could return to Judaism, but he was intercepted and sent back to Aragon. He continued his Jewish scholarly work and even wrote a work of polemics against Christianity with the satirical title Al Tehi Ka Aboteka.
Yeah,
Be not,
you're really good at this.
thank you. Be not like your fathers. Durin is also known in Judaism as the Ephodi. The fact that Durin is represented the Jewish side in this disputation must mean that an exception was made for him by the church, allowing him at some point to return to Judaism.
Yeah, isn't that something? So he was forced to become a Christian. He was arrested. He couldn't escape to that, but he still now represents the Jewish side. It's really interesting. Then you had Astruk Halevi.
At one point, after the Christian disputants repeatedly used some extravagant midrashic allegorical statements from the Talmud as arguments against Judaism, Astruk handed to the assembly a written declaration in which he denied any authority of midrash and utterly renounced it. At another point, Astruk enraged the Pope. After Pope Benedict argued that it was not believable that the Messiah could have been born in the day of the destruction of the temple and that he was now in paradise, Astruk Halevi said, "Lord and Pope, you believe so many improbabilities about your Messiah. Let us believe this single one about ours."
Yeah, you believe he walked on water. You believed he broke. He shared a few breads and fed thousands of people. You believe he resurrected from the dead. He went to heaven. Those are unbelievable things. But so many. This is one thing we want to believe. Let us have it. So the Pope got angry. Joseph Albo is another one, very important character.
Joseph Albo. One argument made by Joseph Albo during the disputation that stands out is that belief in the Messiah is not an essential principle of faith in Judaism. After the Tortosa disputation, Albo wrote Sefer HaIkarim, Book of Fundamental Principles, in which he presents a system of only 3 Jewish principles of faith as an alternative to the 13 principles of Maimonides.
So he said Maimonides has 13 principles of faith, but it's too much. Not everything is necessary. You have to believe in 3 things only. And the Messiah is not one of them. So some people think the Messiah is the most important thing of Judaism nowadays. But he said, no, it's not. It's just it's a thing that people believe in, but it's not essential. It's very interesting, actually. Like there's many candidates for Messiahs have come, and we've seen a bunch. And actually, on Thursday, our last class is about somebody who came up shortly after this period we're talking about now, who claimed to be the Messiah, and caused every time you had somebody like that, there was trouble for the Jewish people. So maybe it's a good idea to follow Joseph Albo and give up the not the messianic dream of world peace, but the idea of a personal Messiah. Maybe I don't want to be a heretic here, according to Maimonides, but it's something to consider, right?
In the Sefer HaIkarim, Albo brings the Jewish belief system down to 3 main principles: belief in the existence of God, from which is derived God's unity, incorporeality, timelessness, and perfection. Belief in God's revelation. Connected to this is the notion of prophecy. Belief in divine justice, from which is derived reward and punishment, immortality, and God's omniscience.
Messiah you don't see here. Interesting, right? And also, if it's just God's justice, does it have to be a physical resurrection of the dead? Maybe not necessarily. If these are the 3 things to believe in, then that's quite inclusive. Yeah, it's harder to be a heretic if there's only the 3 things that you have to believe in. Okay.
The Tortosa disputation lasted almost 2 years. Given that the disputation was held on unequal terms and that the pressure on the Jews was enormous, it is no surprise that many gave in to the pressure and converted to Judaism, including many prominent leaders of the Jewish community.
Yeah, it goes on and on and on, and it wears people out. And every time there's a discussion, you cannot give an answer because it would be insulting. You'd be arrested and burnt alive if you'd say, well, this is nonsense about, well, you're insulting Christianity. So you can't even argue decently, right? It's not a good argumentation possible. So every time there's an argument and people announce in the cities the Jews have lost another point and discussion, and some people like, oh, we're the losing side. Maybe God is not on our side. And so a lot of people, this one wore the people really out, and there were a lot of conversions as a result. Makai will make this the last one, yeah, for you.
Okay. As pressure on the Jews kept increasing and as the Inquisition kept uncovering fabricated proof of large numbers of Judaizers, the conclusion was presented that the only remedy to prevent new Christians from being influenced by Jews was to completely separate them from the Jewish community in a drastic way.
So they had to live in other neighborhoods. They couldn't, and Jews had to be in separate neighborhoods, but also new Christians couldn't live close to the Jews. They weren't allowed to visit the Jewish neighborhoods unless they had specifically a permit, and they had to leave before night, and they were never allowed to be there on the Sabbath or the holidays, and all these things were closely monitored. And eventually you'll see it's going to be even more drastic. So now we're going to go to someone else. Is Nicholas in our midst? Natalie, maybe? I think so, right?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Yes, I knew. Thank you so much for being here then. Natalie, it's up to you now.
Sure. Still, Jews were hoping for a better time in Spain. From 1422 till 1430, the rabbi of Maqueda, Rabbi Moses Aragel de Guadalajara, worked on an impressive project. A richly illustrated Spanish translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, from the original Hebrew, accompanied by many Sephardi Jewish commentaries as well as even some Christian commentaries.
Yeah, so here it's what's called the Alba Bible. I'm going to go a bit faster because time is running out a bit. And so it was he worked on it so hard and concluded, and so it's the oldest Spanish that's written. The whole Bible and commentaries all in Spanish, and people study sometimes to study Old Spanish. How was that? So all these the illustrations were actually done by monks, and therefore you see here this is Cain and Abel on the right, on the top. And you see God is accepting the sacrifice of Abel and not of Cain, but you see God is here portrayed like Jesus with a how do you call this? Halo, yeah. So and here too, this is a blessing here on the south by God. This looks like Jesus, and here even. I think I don't know who this is, but this is Abraham circumcising his household. They're all with bloody penises here, but Moses looks also like Jesus with a crown of thorns almost. It's very interesting stuff. So it was lost and then it was found again. And so the current value of the Alba Bible is, this was a few years ago, it's probably 3 million now. But those reproductions were printed in 1992, high quality reproductions, only 500, and you can buy one for, they were sold for 44,000 a piece. So if you want a nice Hanukkah present for your professor, they are for sale right now. Okay, we'll go to Abarbanel. Nathalie?
Isaac Abarbanel was born in Lisbon, Portugal. The Abarbanel family had moved there after having survived the 1391 massacre in Castile. Abarbanel was a brilliant student and excelled in rabbinic literature and Jewish philosophy. Already when he was 20 years old, Abarbanel wrote on the original forms of the natural elements, earth, water, fire, air, on the prophets, and on other religious topics.
20 years old, so he's a progeny. He's a very smart, young Jewish boy, man. So here's King Alfonso II and Don, which means Sir Isaac Abarbanel.
Abarbanel was also gifted in financial matters, which was noticed by King Afonso II of Portugal, who made him his treasurer, Minister of Finance. A last Iberian example of a Jewish scholar close to the throne who used his influence for the good of the Jewish community.
Yeah.
When, in 1481, King Afonso died, the Duke of Braganza was accused of conspiracy against the new king.
II.
Okay. The Duke Fernando II was executed in 1483. Isaac Abarbanel had been very close to the Duke and was accused of treason by King. How'd you say that again?
João.
Joao II. The Duke of Braganza had warned Don Abarbanel that he was in danger, and the rabbi was able to flee to the city of Toledo, in Castile, before being arrested. He thereby saved his life, but all his possessions were confiscated by Joao.
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 Now it gets really very important. This is very important stuff. Uh-huh.
In the first 6 months after arriving in Toledo, Abarbanel wrote Bible commentaries on the book of Joshua, Judges, and Samuel. Soon after, he was employed by the House of Castile and started working for Queen Isabella the Catholic.
She was called Queen Isabella the Catholic. I respect Catholic people, but this was not a very nice woman. I am inclined to nickname her the bitch. And you'll see why. Okay.
Queen Isabella of Castile and her husband King Ferdinand of Aragon full-heartedly supported the goals of the Inquisition.
Yeah, so she's like, Inquisition is a good thing. Torture people. Good. Here, these just, I don't like the look. Okay, yeah?
They, especially Isabella, also wanted to create a pure Catholic nation at any cost. Isabella declared that she would rather let the country be depopulated than have it populated by heresy.
If we have to massacre everybody in order to have a pure Catholic country, I'd rather do that. Well, not my type of girl. Uh-huh.
When her highly intelligent daughter Joanna was not much devoted to worship and Catholic rituals, refused to go to confession, and even expressed doubts about some aspects of the Catholic faith, Queen Isabella handed her over to the Inquisition, where she was punished with la cuerda.
La cuerda means the court, and this is what it is. You hang somebody, her own child. That's why I have no respect for this queen. Never go. I mean, maybe some people might have family members whose name is Isabella, but I would not recommend it. Naming your daughter Isabella, just for this. Although there are very nice Isabellas, but I like this woman so much. So say if your husband or wife says, "I want to name my daughter Isabella," I said, "No, professor was not in favor." Okay, continue. But it's so sad. Okay.
Naturally, that did not contribute to her emotional well-being, and Joanna developed a mental illness, which gave her the nickname Joanna the Mad.
Yeah. She became crazy, and then she was married off to the emperor. I mean, they had to lock her up. She just totally messed up. What do you think, right? Now, on March 31, 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic champion of Catholicism, in their idea, right? Not according to the Pope today, decreed the expulsion of all Jews from Spain, because the idea was that these new Christians are getting influenced by Jews. So the only way to get rid of to avoid the new Christians to prevent that they have Jewish influence is to expel all the Jews from the country. This decree was called the Alhambra Decree. Jews had until July 31, which is April, May, June, July, which is 4 months, to leave the country. They had to sell all their properties. They couldn't take anything with them, let's say houses and stuff. And so, of course, the prices plunged. And this was just a few days before Christopher Columbus would discover the New World. That's why I always think that the 1492 is really the end of the Middle Ages. Everything changes. The Jews are out in Spain. The whole country changes. You have the printing press. You have the New World. It's like everything changes in 1492. You want to read? Let's go read two more slides.
Okay. Isaac of Barbanel offered King Ferdinand a large sum of money if he would revoke the Alhambra decree. The king hesitated, but when Thomas de Torquemada found out about the offer, he bargained into the presence of Ferdinand and Isabella, threw a crucifix before their feet, and asked if they were going to betray their lord for money like Judas had done. In the end, Barbanel was only able to have the expulsion postponed for 2 days.
Isn't that something, huh? Yeah. Yeah.
In addition to the 50,000 Jews that had already converted to Christianity, an additional 200,000 converted to be able to remain in Spain.
Because sometimes, not everybody's rich, and you have to, now what do you think these tickets for these ships cost to get out. Everybody wants to get out, hundreds of thousands. So people, these sailors make a mint. Now, not everybody had the money to do that, so they had to stay behind, and they don't want to be burned alive. So they thought, maybe we'll get out later. But so many people converted, right? But it's a trap. You can't get out anymore.
The rest of the Jews, between 40,000 and 100,000, left. Some to Portugal, which still allowed Jews, some to North Africa, but others accepted the invitation of the Ottoman Sultan to settle in the territories of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent said about King Ferdinand, "You can call him king who impoverishes his lands to enrich mine."
Is that a king who kicks out all these wealthy and smart people, and that just benefits me? By the way, Portugal still allowed it. Portugal then became the dominant power after Spain, because Spain got rid of all their brain trust, so to say, brain power. And so Portugal all of a sudden became wealthy and thriving, but then under pressure, soon enough, they also had to expel. That's the last class, is about Portugal. We only have 4 minutes, but this is Abarbanel. So he goes to Italy and he writes books, and maybe you read this for yourself, but he has an interesting concept. And also, he writes on everything, but he always starts with critical questions about the text. For instance, we already read the text when God began to create heaven and earth. The earth was unformed and void, darkness over the surface of the earth, the wind of God sweeping over the water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. Was called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening and there was morning one day. He asked tons of questions. He says, for instance, it says God created heaven and earth. That should be enough. Why do we have to now go into all these other things? If heaven and earth is created, why does now he have to create the animals and stuff? Isn't that already implied? He says, every time he says, "Let there be light, let the water separate, let there be dry land, let there be trees, let there be animals." Why doesn't it say in the beginning, when he created heaven and earth, God said, "Let there be heaven and earth"? It doesn't say that. How is it possible that God separated light from darkness? Darkness isn't something substantial, because darkness is just the absence of light. How can you actually, how is that possible? It says, God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light. What does the Torah mean? That if the light wasn't good, he wouldn't have separated them? What is the connection between these two? Questions and questions and questions. Very, very interesting. Now, these people were still so connected to Spain that when they settled all outside of Spain and Portugal, in North Africa, in the Middle East, in Turkey, in the Balkans, they still called themselves Spaniards. Sephardi means Spaniards. So they consider themselves Spaniards up to very centuries and centuries. Proud, we are Spaniards. Well, we were expelled, but we are Spaniards. People sometimes put on their tombstone Spaniard. Or I've seen interviews of people who died, but a bunch of years ago, but in my lifetime, dreaming to have a Spanish passport because they were so proud to be Spanish. So, and then they kept speaking Spanish. Much later, that was called Ladino, but they always called it Spanish. And Spanish was written with Hebrew letters, but then Turkey forbade the use of Hebrew and Arabic letters for non-religious purposes. So now, actually, these are now newspapers. Turkey still has a number of newspapers in Ladino or in Spanish, but written according to Turkish spelling. So, for instance, you see there it looks like Salon, but that S with a little hook underneath the S in Turkish, that is a sh. So that's how you spell in Turkish, sh. So this is a Turkish spelling of the word shalom. And everything is Spanish in Turkish spelling. So, as we saw, in the early Middle Ages, the great cultural divide was between Jews of the Islamic world and Jews of the Christian world. And we saw examples of these. So here's a Jew from the Arabic world, a Jew from the Christian world. Both are called Sjimon and Hollander here. But later you had the divide between Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews. Now, these Sephardi Jews that settled in the Arabic world, Islamic world, are not the same as the Arabic Jews from before, because they are, when they settled there, they already were a product of Christian world. They brought Kabbalah, they brought things that really were the heritage of the Christian world. We saw Isaac Luria, and so this kind of Kabbalah spread among even the Arabic Jews who were in North Africa from this. Of course, the Inquisition kept hunting for Judaizers, and through the centuries, the last execution in Spain by the Inquisition was as late as 1826. So it went on for hundreds of years. People from Spain and Portugal who were persecuted often went to the Americas when that was discovered, away from the Inquisition. And later the Inquisition came to South America. They went into the jungle. So you have in Brazil, you have people who live in faraway regions and who still had Jewish customs, even not knowing that they were Jewish. That was just family traditions. And there are entire communities in South America of people who are coming out of the woodwork and saying, you know what, we had Jewish ancestors, and who were actually returned to Judaism. There are some songs that I have. You can listen to it yourself. Abraham Avinu is a song in Spanish. It's a Jewish song.
Cuando el rey Nimrod al campo salía, miraba en el cielo y en la estrellería, vido una luz santa en la judería, que había de nacer Abraham Avinu.
Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Luego a las comadres se encomendaba que toda mujer.
Bendigamos.
Bendigamos al Altísimo, al Señor que nos crió. Démosle agradecimiento por los bienes que nos dio. Alabado sea su santo nombre, porque siempre nos afianzó. Load al Señor que es bueno, que para siempre su merced.
And Achot Ketana.
Achot Ketana Tefiloteha Morecha Venona Tehiloteha Kelna Refana Kelna Refana Kelna Refana Lema Chaloteha Tichle Shana Beki Aleloteha
בנועם מילים לך תקראה, ושיר והילולים כי לך נאה. על מה תגלים עיניך ותראה, זרים אוכלים, זרים אוכלים, זרים אוכלים, נחלותיה תכלה שנה וקללותיה.
רנגת צונך אריות זרו ושפוך חרונך באומרים נרו וחנת ימינך פרצו וערו לא השאירו לא השאירו לא השאירו לילותיה תכלה שנה וקללותיה. מתי תעלה בתך מבור מבית כלא מולה תשבור ותפלי פלא בצאתך כריבור להתם וכלה להתם וכלה להתם וכלה מחלותיה תכלה שנה וקללותיה. חילה קבנו הגוי כולו וטובה סבנו בזזו איש לו וליבה קרנו ובכל זאת לא ממך נגנו לא ממך נגנו לא ממך נגנו מנגלותיה תכלה שנה וקללותיה. זמירה שבת וחשכה תחביר לחפוץ קרבת דודה ותעביר מלבדה אבת נפשה ותסיר לבקש אהבת לבקש אהבת לבקש אהבת כלולותיה תכלה שנה וקללותיה. נחיה בנחת לנברי בצע רב נזנחת מדוד חפצה והיא כפורחת עלתה ניצח, לא הבשילו, לא הבשילו, לא הבשילו אשכולותיה, תכלה שנה וקללותיה.
חזקו וגילו כי שוד גמר, לצור הוכילו בריתו שמר, לכם ותעלו לציון ואמר, סולו 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 מסילותיה, תחל שנה וברכותיה.
Our time is up now. It's an illustration of the Sephardi culture that has continued later, actually, as the Jews moved to all these countries outside of Spain and mingled with other Jews there, non-Ashkenazi Jews. So often in practice now, most people who are not Ashkenazi are called Sephardi. Sephardi is now not Spanish anymore. It's used as worldwide Judaism outside of Central Europe, basically. It's often called Sephardi. And that was the end of our class of today. How Arabic Jews became the new Sephardi identity, how this had come